All right, so Gaban versus Sombers, or really Gaban versus the Holy Knights, including Gunkko. The context is clear. Gaban wanted to go save the kids, save Elbaf. The Straw Hats were captured, and Sombers, starting things off, was looking at the Straw Hats captured. He was, talking with them or whatever the case. And Gaban comes in out of nowhere, cuts off his hand. Sombers then says, "What? It's not coming back." Been a while, says Gaban, to which Sombers says, "Scopper Gaban." But by the time he registers what's happening, he's already been cut, right? So both these encounters are very cut and dry. These are both off guards. Obviously, the first one, no attention is being paid. Second one, by the time he registers what's actually happening, it's too late to react. So we would give Sombers grace in this and not classify either of these as a blitz. We would then move on to the next chapter, 1149, where the fight continues. So then now we see what looks to be the aftermath of the attack we saw at the end of the last. The axe is still in the same hand. Sombers is just now finally landing on the ground. So still to this point, nothing of real note. Obviously, he can damage him. Obviously, whatever hockey is being used here, we're obviously going to have to find out. But he damaged him, but he attacked him with 2 off-guard attacks. Gaban then does say he's rusty, a similar statement of what Rayleigh had said back in Saboti. At that point, even after you could argue that Sombers should be reeling here, obviously he's being basically overwhelmed. When Gaban goes to attack once again, Sombers is actually able to react with Thorn Salation and block Gaban's initial strike. You can clearly tell that Sombers is, already out of breath here. He's like, "Huff, Mountain Eater, what are you doing in Elbaf?" He's worried, but he does block and react to this initial attack. And you could even argue that, it was at the last second, obviously, because you could see he's on the back foot. He was obviously just gathering himself back to his feet. So it's actually semi-impressive. He's able to get back up to his feet, react to Gaban's attack, activate an attack, and still, obviously get away from it. At that point, the thorns go down. Gaban continues attacking, saying, "Let's not get bogged down with boring questions," and swipes his axe at Sombers once again, to which Sombers clashes in the middle a few times with his vine weapon. He reacts, able to keep up with these slashes. This is, of course, where the Strahds are talking, and Nami's talking out her ass, saying, yeah, he was totally pushing Luffy and Zoro around, which we obviously know, the truth of what happened in that encounter. I have a breakdown on that on the page. You then have, the statement Jinbei talks about him being the counterpart of Rayleigh, which is all this means, because it's in reference to him understanding who Gaban is. Obviously one of the wings of the Pirate King. We don't even know if Jinbei's seen Rayleigh in combat specifically. Even if he did, I've already made a breakdown on the other statements of equality for Rayleigh. It wouldn't matter. Just check out that video. It's not a literal meaning. The right hand is the counterpart for the left hand, right? Or vice versa. It's interesting to note that Chopper here is watching how his attacks are doing damage, and he's saying, "But how?" And it's not Jinbei that's talking about it, because Jinbei obviously knows what Conqueror's Haki is. I'm not saying Gaban doesn't have Conqueror's Haki. I don't really know. It looks similar to Conquerors that we've seen in the past, but I don't think that even if he does have Conquerors, that Conquerors is necessarily what is stopping the regen. Of course, maybe Oda goes through with that, but from what I'm seeing right now, if Chopper's learning about what it is, I think that all the Straw Hats are going to get this ability at some point, or understand this ability, and I obviously don't think all the Straw Hats are Conquerors. So after that little clash, Sombers then says Thorn Hunt and Crimson Lotus Hell. So he uses 2 attacks to try to pin Gaban down. There's some range in between them at this point. He says, "Watch your step, there's no safe passage." And Gaban says, "Listen, I'm in a hurry." And right as the vines are about to hit Gaban, it looks like Gaban swings his axe in a circle, slices up all these vines that were coming his way, as Sombers says, "Come on then." And he is clearly on guard here and is sliced in 2. This could potentially be the first instance of a blitz, because Sombers is on guard, Gaban had to react to another attack first, and then he cuts down Sombers with Axe Symphony. But what I want to point out is that you clearly do see on panel that Gaban cut through Sombers' weapon. That basically could imply that Sombers did in fact actually react in time, which would be consistent with his other reactionary feats on Gaban. Gaban was just simply too powerful for him. So I restrained myself from saying that this is an absolute blitz. It does seem as if Sombers did try to react to some extent, because obviously you see when he says, "Come on then," weapons in a different position than when it is cut in 2. So he does have some reaction to it. It is just simply not strong enough, and he gets cut in 2. Gaban then lands, and he avoids all the thorns on the ground successfully, runs past where Sombers' body dropped, and then goes on to find his kid. Another instance of Chopper, talking about how is he able to slice up a guy who's immortal. This has got to be a crucial secret again, emphasizing that Chopper's probably going to figure out this ability, whatever it is. Now, when we get over to Gunkko here, what we see is that Gunkko already has this arrow out leading the children on the left-hand side of their bodies, okay? We see that Gunkko witnesses Gaban full sprint rushing towards her as he screams out, "Culture, history, children, troops, you don't have any right to take these things away." As Gunkko says, a crewmate of the King of the Pirates, you realize that resistance means the death of these hostages. That's of course when, Colin basically says like that's his father and everything, and Gaban's pissed off. He's like, "Don't do it, don't give away that you're my son," because obviously that's going to be a crux to weaken him. If Gunkko realizes this, she can use him to her advantage. This basically ends up happening, but like I said, the arrow that was out initially is on the left hand side. So at this point, Gunkko does realize what's happening. Gaban has stayed in a full sprint this entire time. Gunkko is in a stagnant position. She looks back, pinpoints where Colin is, pinpoints it's him, and then a new arrow goes out here on the right hand side of the children. So basically what you have is that Gaban here tries to attack Gunkko. You see it very clear, and he misses his attack. She gets out of range, gets out of way of the attack fast enough to get to Colin first. And it's not even just getting to Colin, she evaded his attack. So she does react to Gaban's attack here. I do think that this is grounds to classify an outpacing. Obviously you could argue things such as she's in closer proximity to Colin. But again, Gaban is already sprinting. She's in a stagnant spot, and you clearly see that a new arrow, or even if you wanted to say it was the old arrow, like it would just take a completely different course. It's not as if this specific arrow was already out. So activation and mobilization had to occur all within the time it took for her to react to the stimulus and choose her targets. She gets up to Colin again, kind of leaves Gaban in the dust there. She says, "You don't mind if I kill him?" Gaban says, "This is my final chance. There's still time to put out the fire in the library. I can save the children and Elbaf in this process as long as it's in an instant." It's got to be an instant course of action here. He says, "Hang on there, Colin. Give me a second. You're big and strong now." At this moment, what you see is that Colin is crying out for his dad. Gunkko says a life lost will never return. And Gaban has a flashback to Ripley giving birth, seeing Colin as a child, and obviously he is weighed down by this. Gunkko has the lance piercing into Colin at this point. Gaban charges up an attack. He says, "I have to put an end to this before things spiral out of control." He rushes forward, and it's almost as if he sees a future here. Now, this is what people are claiming is future sight. Now, I'm not going to just straight up say, like, I don't believe this is future sight. I'm not going to say that because it very well could be. All I'm going to do is pose a question here. Is it out of the realm of possibility that Gaban is simply imagining that Colin dies here because she's already putting this into his neck? The reason I say this is because if you look at Gaban's positioning in the next panel, it's not congruent with what he would be seeing if he were to see a future. The future image is shown from the front. His actual positioning is from behind. Now, what you could say is that, well, you could see into the future of Gaban being in a new position. But if that was the case, what that would imply is that he missed his attack, or Gunkko was simply able to evade said attack to where Gaban now was positioned in front and she still was able to kill him. Now, the reason I say this is all because, like, in previous instances of future sight, like we see Luffy, he sees like an image of like what's in front of him. Same from Katakuri. It's usually very consistent with the positioning of the user. Now, if there's another instance, somebody may bring up Shanks, but even then it's like he just kind of sees the aftermath in the manga. Right, so I've never seen a definitive instance of future sight being used where there's a completely separate angle from where the actual user is located. Not saying this can't just be an inconsistency for Oda, not just saying that he might want to show it in an angle that the readers can see, but I'm just posing that question and leaving it up to you guys, what you guys think. And then I say, again, well, if he did use it, if his positioning did change, does that mean that Gunkko simply evaded his attack and continued on to kill Colin? If that's the case, that would kind of go in line with her just being considerably faster than him at a point where she can even outpace him using future sight. All these things are up in the air at this point. I suppose it's also possible that when Colin is inevitably killed, his will breaks and then he just kind of like lets go of the attack when he sees it. Maybe that's how he ends up in front. You also could just take a stance that you think that the observation isn't angle dependent. Like I said, I'm just putting this out there, posing the question, because I haven't seen anything that looks like this. I'm genuinely curious what you guys think about it. I'm sure most people will think it's future sight, but I'm just putting this out there. A future sight could also be reinforced for Gaban, given the encounter with Luffy and Zoro. There was a glint in his eye right before, Luffy and Zoro were about to get serious, and then he yielded. So you could maybe theorize that, he saw a future in which it wasn't going to end well for him, or at the very least saw glimpses of like what they're truly capable of with that future. So again, I'm fine with either, but I wanted to share that thought with you guys. Gaban at that moment yields, drops his axe, and then you see Gunkko shoots her arrow through Gaban, who's obviously mentally nerfed at this point. His will's kind of been broken because he doesn't want to lose his son, so I'm not going to hold it against him that he gets hit by this attack. Obviously, I think he's kind of just surrendering, as he said. He gets hit by the attack, it does pretty massive damage to him, and he drops out. We don't know any of the aftermath as of yet, and in all fairness, we do need more consistency from Gunkko's feats to kind of get a gauge if she is definitively faster than him. But at this point, she does have some smaller time feats, like obviously outpacing both Brook and Jinbei arguably with her arrows, repositioning their attacks. They are kind of surprised by the ability, but at this point there's kind of a consistency building up that she's pretty fast. So at this time, I'm going to say I wouldn't be surprised if Gunkko is just outright faster than Gaban. Now, Gunkko is obviously going to be amped by EM, so I expect that to even get further amplified. In the case of Sombers and Gaban, obviously Gaban is clear of Sombers. That was a low diff, couple exchanges and, cut through him. Now, who's to say it might not have been a little different if the two off guards didn't take place? We don't really know, but I don't think at the end of the day it's going to change Gaban just overwhelming him in the end. So I'm fine with that being just a straight low diff. As far as Gunkko and Gaban, jury's out on who's stronger between the two of them. Let me know your assessment in the comments below. Do you agree with mine? What's your takeaways from this chapter? And are you hyped for the next one? Let me know. I'll see you guys then. Peace.